DC is home to some of the very best female characters ever created. From Catwoman to Wonder Woman, from Lois Lane to Black Canary, from Vixen to Zatanna, from Supergirl to Poison Ivy, and the list goes on and on. For some reason, though, some female characters never reached that same level of fame and popularity, despite having all the right attributes to become just as big. And there might be no better example of that than my all-time second favorite character, the strong but shy forgotten hero, Dolphin, the platinum-haired, mysterious underwater beauty who stole the heart of Aquaman, founded a team with Animal Man, was brave enough to fight Wonder Woman, was the inspiration behind a Batman Beyond character, and punched the living daisies out of Mera, a character that has sadly never been able to escape her B-level status. Created by the legendary J. Scott Pike almost 60 years ago, Dolphin made her first appearance on the now iconic DC's Showcase 79 on 1968. In the story, The Fantasy at 14 Fathoms, where her past is revealed. Having fallen off board as a child, Dolphin survived only after being captured by a group of aliens who were splicing human and sea life DNA. Dolphin would become one of only 2 survivors from the experiment, becoming something far greater than human. Dolphin was eventually freed by the villain Cordax. However, as a result of the experiments, Dolphin was now able to live underwater, just as any native from Atlantis. Dolphin survived years alone in the ocean by eating what she could, eventually finding her now iconic clothes on a sunken ship. Dolphin would later be found by a group of soldiers investigating the remains of a wreckage, the same man who would later name her Dolphin. This would become the first interaction with humans she had since she was a child, and after all those years of being alone underwater, Dolphin had gone mute. She eventually began getting sick from being on dry land, and so she had to return to the only real home she ever had, the sea. After that, Dolphin would later reappear in the last issue of Showcase, where she saved Sugar and Spike from drowning. By the way, this is the first time they established she was an ally of Aquaman. Later on, she would join DC's most underrated team ever, the Forgotten Heroes, next to Animal Man, Kongorilla, Rip Hunter, Dave Dorrance, and Cave Carson. The Forgotten Heroes went out on missions that would usually go unnoticed by the bigger names. The cases they solved almost always had ecological repercussions, and they even teamed up with Superman a couple times. Dolphin and the Forgotten Heroes had a small but relevant part on the Crisis on Infinite Earths finale, where she joins Animal Man and Adam Strange in space. In fact, Dolphin is the one that convinces Brainiac to help them, and eventually they all go to Apocalypse, where she comes face to face with Darkseid, even exchanging a few words with him. Sadly, the Forgotten Heroes didn't last much longer. After Crisis, Dolphin made her modern debut on the pages of Animal Man, issue 15, on a powerful story by Grant Morrison, where she reunites with Animal Man and Dave Dorrance for the first time since the Forgotten Heroes separated. The 3 of them stop a group of sick fishermen who have a vile, twisted, yearly tradition where they lure dolphins to the shore, only to... you get the picture. Anyways, it's a phenomenal single issue that can be a little bit hard to swallow, but it's completely worth it. I don't want to spoil anything for you because I think this issue gives a powerful message that I would love for you to discover without any kind of spoilers. So that's about as much as I can say about this issue. Now, for the record, this issue of Animal Man is widely considered to be one of the best in the whole series, with Ryan Boland's cover becoming one of the most memorable, if not the most memorable. After that, Dolphin became the main attraction of Ocean World, a SeaWorld-inspired aquatic theme park that also functioned as a research lab where she was giving live shows with other dolphins. Quickly after, and wearing the same one-piece swimsuit from her show, Dolphin joined the Justice League Task Force for a brief time, next to some big names like Wonder Woman, Martian Manhunter, and Vixen, proving to be a valuable asset in the team, and by far the character with the biggest heart as well as the most relatable and sympathetic character in the roster. Soon after, Dolphin made her biggest splash so far as a major character in Peter David's fan-favorite 1994 Aquaman, proving once and for all what a compelling character she was, and just how much can be done with her. On this run, she not only became Aquaman's most loyal ally, but for a brief time even his lover. Now keep in mind, this was during Mera's absence, when she had seemingly abandoned Aquaman forever, only to return one day to find them in bed and co-star in the mother of all aquatic catfights. After all the shenanigans, Dolphin was placed aside, finding comfort in the arms of Aqualad, Aquaman's first sidekick and founding member of the Teen Titans, who later became Tempest, with whom Dolphin would fall in love with, eventually marrying him, and even having his child. Sadly, when the writers didn't know what to do with her, Dolphin and her child would be eliminated in the worst way possible, only so Tempest could go on to have his own adventures without any baggage. Then, on the Blackest Night event, she returned as a Black Lantern, only to be humiliated once again. And you know what? I really don't want to talk about that because it really pisses me off, so I'll just leave it there. Let's move on. On 2017, Dolphin would reappear alive and kicking on Rebirth's Aquaman. This time, however, with several changes. Most notably, perhaps, was her amphibian-looking skin, full of blue scales, reminiscent of a dead fish, with her classic garments missing, sporting a more modern outfit. Interestingly enough, this time she was portrayed as a silent character, which was one of the most unique things about the original Dolphin, so this was a step in the right direction. However, as it always seems to happen with her, after Aquaman 65, they somewhat shelved her again in 2021, though she did reappear as a background character in the Titans Beast World Tour special. But she doesn't really do anything, and that was last year, so who knows when we'll actually see her again. Now, make no mistake, despite her timid nature, Dolphin has a strength level that rivals Aquaman's, making her one of the strongest, mightiest aquatic characters. She was actually able to take down Mera, even when she was using her hydrokinetic powers, breaking free from the restraints with nothing but pure strength. Dolphin at one point, actually, and without any real effort, and using nothing but her legs, broke the neck of a powerful high seer who is from the race of underwater aliens that settled in the Atlantean city of High Brazil, which are known to be immensely strong. Dolphin is so physically imposing that she managed to actually draw blood from Wonder Woman, while confusing her as a threat for Aquaman. And yes, of course, Wonder Woman eventually took her down, but even Wonder Woman was surprised at just how tough Dolphin was. By the way, for those wondering, yes, even though they are nowhere near on the same level, Atlanteans are so strong, they can hurt both Amazons and Kryptonians. And although not on the same level as those races, Dolphin is also invulnerable, as she has a body so dense and hard that she is able to resist the crushing pressures of the deep underwater sea, which makes her seem invulnerable when compared to any human. Aside from all her physical abilities, Dolphin has both enhanced healing as well as decelerated aging, allowing her to recover rather quickly from most injuries, and slowing her aging process to a point where she appears as a very young woman when in fact she is much older than most of the DC universe, not counting Vandal Savage or other eternal beings. Dolphin will most likely outlive the vast majority of other DC heroes, by the way. Dolphin is also extremely fast, able to swim much faster than any real dolphin ever could. In fact, Dolphin has displayed a speed level even greater than Aquaman himself. With a soft and shy demeanor, Dolphin stands out against an ocean of confident comic book females with a lot of attitude and sass. In fact, one of the things that makes Dolphin so special and so unique is how she basically chooses not to communicate verbally, despite having learned how to speak, opting to stay silent unless absolutely necessary, which is a nice change of pace, especially when compared to the majority of female characters who always have a witty remark for everything. In later appearances, though, some writers sort of drifted away from that, and she became more and more talkative, which I never really liked. I've always felt that Dolphin works best as a reserved character, contrasting with all the other highly outgoing and unreserved women. Throughout the years, Dolphin has changed looks multiple times, going from her original and best look to wearing a regular shirt, to an actual swimsuit, to wearing Aquaman's dirty laundry, to a Little Mermaid inspired look that lasted very little, until eventually going back to swimmer gear. However, no look will ever come close to the original look, designed by the great J. Scott Pike, which, as simple as it may be, and it is perhaps a little too simple, has also become iconic. In fact, it's the only iconic look she's ever really had, and it's the only one she really needs. Not every hero needs spandex, boots, or a cape. Outside of comics, Dolphin has never been adapted, or at least not officially, though there is a character from the DCAU who is more than obviously inspired by her in terms of looks, personality, and powers, and just about everything. And that is Aquagirl from the two-part season 3 finale of Batman Beyond. Aquagirl is a member of the Justice League and is said to be Aquaman's daughter. And if you look closely, you'll see that she's wearing a dark one-piece swimsuit just like Dolphin did in the 90s. She even has the same hair color and style as well as the same personality. Now, there was no reason why they couldn't just include Dolphin, given how she seemingly does not age, and it's also much stronger and faster than Aquagirl. So it's kinda silly they went for an almost identical character, but with weaker powers. Then again, this comes from the same people that mishandled Selena. So, actually, you know what? I almost forgot she has been adapted on animation, having made her debut on Young Justice, though she is barely recognizable. And once again, the writers don't give her much to do. On early 90s, as an attempt to replicate the success of She-Ra, Princess of Power, the famous toy brand, Mattel, planned a toy line featuring Wonder Woman leading a group of female heroes in fantastic adventures. And among those heroes was Dolphin, which in this series would have been presented as a princess from Atlantis. By the way, Eyes from Justice League Europe would have also been featured. The toy line was to have an animated series as well as a comic book series to go with, though the toy line eventually got cancelled, and the only thing that was published was a single issue from the comic book. In live action, after the Amber Heard Johnny Depp fiasco, It was heavily rumored that Mera would be erased from the Aquaman sequel, and Dolphin would be the one taking her place. The rumors were so strong, and James Wan was so open about the possibility to potentially feature Dolphin in the film that prices for Dolphin's first appearance skyrocketed to absurd levels. Sadly, everything turned out to be for nothing, as Dolphin does not appear in the film. On the bright side, Dolphin creator Mr. J. Scott Pike, who is also famous for his extensive work in romance comics, as well as being the co-creator of Jan of the Jungle for Marvel Comics, lived a long and happy fulfilling life. Mr. Pike had a beautiful loving family which consisted of he and his wife, Margie, as well as their 6 children. Pike married only once and remained married till the day he passed away at age 91. By the way, I have to mention that Mr. Pike continued drawing beautifully till his later days, as can be seen by the art shared by the comic book art collector community, where Mr. Pike's illustrations are highly regarded, and even considered to be the holy grail of 60s comic book art. Mr. Pike's illustrations done during his later years look just as high quality and gorgeous as ever. Famous comic book painter and fellow comic art collector Joe Jusko is a massive Pike fan and has been very vocal about his love and appreciation for Pike's work, citing him as one of his biggest influences, even doing an homage to Mr. Pike at certain points. Mr. Jusko is openly hunting down Mr. Pike's work on Dolphin, so if anyone knows the whereabouts of this beautiful art, please contact him. Now, I swear I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer or mean or anything like that, but part of Dolphin's lack of appearances has to do with all the similar characters who were created to take her place, but failed to do so. One of the loudest examples was Lorena Marquez, another character with the same exact abilities, who was later named Aqua Girl, not to be confused with Tula, the first Aqua Girl. For a while, it seemed like DC was bent on making her happen, putting her in all sorts of titles, from Aquaman to Teen Titans and others. Needless to say, DC treated Marcus far better than they ever did Dolphin. And so, as a form of comic book karma, despite the push from DC, fans never really embraced this new character. And so DC eventually gave up and shelved her as well they should. By the way, there is no better proof of just how little fans cared about Marquez than the fact that she was only around for about 100 appearances since her debut in 2004, which is an extremely low number when you take into account that DC was pushing her non-stop, especially when compared to basically any other character who has debuted around that time or even later. Now, it's hard to tell what the future has in store for Dolphin, but I sure hope DC starts treating their legacy characters far better than they have in the past. As always, thank you very much for watching. Hope to see you in the next one. Be safe and well. And remember that sometimes the quiet ones can surprise you the most.